I am representing the National Science Foundation Centers Collaborative for Technical Assistance. We are pleased that you have joined us for our webinar entitled Strategies for Business Engagement. Hopefully it will be beneficial to you. Note that this is being recorded, and the recording will be made available to you within a few days via email, giving you the URL that you can click to get to that recording. Note also that the slides will be there as well for you to reference. And in addition, please feel free to contact any of the presenters, because I know that everyone who is presenting today is willing to be of assistance and answer questions. Speaking of that, you are on mute throughout this presentation. However, you do get the opportunity to enter questions as you desire in the question box, and we will address those at various times during the presentation depending on our timing. So without further ado, could we have the next slide? I think I've pretty well told you all of these pieces of information, but this webinar is actually provided to you by the Centers Collaborative for Technical Assistance, funded by the National Science Foundation, to provide technical assistance to all sorts of workforce programs, and it's additionally supported by another grant, which is the ATE Collaborative Impact Project, ATE Centers. Next slide. The CCTA is led by 5 centers across the United States. The National Center for Convergence Technology happens to be the one that I lead. Then we have the South Carolina ATE National Resource Center at Florence Darlington Technical College in South Carolina. We have the Florida ATE Center at Hillsborough Community College in Tampa. The BioLink Next Generation National ATE Center for Biotechnology and Life Sciences in San Francisco, and the Networks Resource Center at the Maricopa Community College District in Phoenix, Arizona. Next slide. Our purpose. We were asked by the Department of Labor several years ago, actually, now about 3 years ago, to provide technical assistance to DOL tax grantees. It turns out that at that time, the ATE Centers program had been in existence for over 20 years, and the tax program itself was only 2 or 3 years old. So the leaders of both programs got together, and the DOL leads thought that it would be a good idea for the National Science Foundation grants to provide assistance to DOL grantees, because good practices for running large grants are good practices for running large grants. It doesn't specifically matter whether or not it is NSF or DOL. These are also good principles for leading workforce-oriented programs of any kind. Our deliverables are our webinars, which are both live, that you're experiencing right now, and recorded with attendee Q&A and archived for reference later. We focus on identifying and documenting best practices. We have some best practices that are also available for download. And we host an annual convening after the High Tech Conference this next year. It's going to actually be in Salt Lake City. And we have a half-day session after that where we focus on primarily items that are of specific interest to the TAC grantees. We are now ready for our poll. We need to know who our audience happens to represent. So you're going to get the opportunity now to pick your affiliation. You can say whether or not you're with an NSF grant, a TAC grant, or both, or neither. Janet, will you let us know when it looks like everybody has voted?
Absolutely. We're just waiting. We've got a few more people coming in. Looks good. I'm going to close the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's closing. Let's have a look. You can see the results.
Okay, 36% are NSF, 11% are TAC, and both 18% and neither 36%. That's terrific. Again, the information that we provide works for pretty much any workforce program. Next slide.
Oh.
One more poll. Whoops. Can you go back one?
Yeah. Don't know
Okay,
what
one more
happened there.
poll.
Okay.
We need to know how many people are listening with you so that we can judge how the size of our audience. So if you would please fill that in.
Why is that not coming up? Is it coming up? How come? Close that. Did yours not come up?
No, I'm seeing the results of the previous poll. Again, this is a live webinar. If it doesn't come up real soon, we won't worry about it.
Okay, hang on.
Here we go. So please
Okay.
answer how many people are actually listening with you so we can get an idea of the size of our audience.
Okay. And we've got 58, 31. So I will close in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Okay, so we have one other person listening with 35% of the people and 2 listening with 12%. Very interesting information. Okay, let's go back to the presentation.
There we go.
All right, I am Ann Beheeler. I'm the Principal Investigator for the National Convergence Technology Center. That's basically information technology and communications, but our businesses want to call it convergence, so we let them call it whatever they want to call it. We're also joined today by Julie Stiak, who is a presenter and also is the District Director for Healthcare Education in the Maricopa Community College District. That's a district of 12 colleges in the Phoenix area. And we're joined by Mary Winchester, who is a presenter as well, and she is an instructor of computers and digital media at McHenry County College. And I will say that both Julie and Mary have adopted what we lovingly call our BUILT process. And not only have they adopted it, they have adapted it for their use. There's nothing that says that our best practice has to be exactly implicated or implemented exactly as is. It can certainly be adapted. So I will present a little bit for background first, and then I believe we have Mary and then Julie presenting. And we'll see how we are on time and whether we can take questions after each section. Please do type those questions into the question box. Next slide. Okay, if you can go back one. All right. I would like to point out that we have a really wonderful situation right now in that our employers are showing confidence in their hiring, and they are hiring. I know that some of us who've been in this business long enough know that there are times when the employers, though we love them, are not hiring. And so we have 36% of the respondents to the Career Builder's annual job forecast saying that they're going to hire, and about half of the employers plan to hire temporary or contract workers. While it is not the focus of this particular webinar, I would encourage all of you to do a little bit of Google searching on the gig economy, that's GIG. There is quite an emphasis in the future on our graduates needing to know how to exist as independent contractors, as temporary workers or independent contractors. So I think that's another thing that's happening with employment trends that's very important for us to watch. Next slide. Why do we involve business? Well, if we're doing a career and technical education program, I don't think we have a whole lot of choice because most all of our states require us to have some number of business meetings every year. Now the question then is, if you are holding a meeting with your businesses just because you have to, what do they get out of it, what do you get out of it, and what good is it to students? And ultimately that's the lens that I like to use. Some of the things that you can get from businesses are donations, presentations, both in the classroom and at conferences. They will also sometimes teach for us. They give us advice. But what happens with advice? Do you have to take it? Well, usually not, but that sometimes erodes the situation. With businesses, I would say that it really needs to be about building relationships with these businesses where they co-lead your work, and you understand why they want to work with you. And that may change over time. What they may say today is the reason for working with you may not be the reason tomorrow. For example, they may right now want you to train workers to fill their pipeline, but maybe at another point in their careers they may actually want to be part of your business team so that they can actually interact in a safe environment with others who are facing monumental changes in the industry. And by the way, IT is about to undergo a huge paradigm shift. If you haven't heard about that, I would welcome you contacting me because we're on top of that as well. The other thing is, why do they want to continue working with you? We have people now that have worked with us for 12 years or more, and that's pretty exciting, but I guarantee you that they would not keep doing that if they weren't getting something out of it. And then how do you want their work to directly impact students? Because ultimately, that's what we're all in this for, or at least that's what I'm in this for. I want to make sure that the students that we graduate are workforce ready and able to get really good jobs that are really not jobs, but they're a beginning for an entire career. And then some techniques, how do you maximize the use of your business representatives without, in fact, wasting their time? That's very important. They're all very busy. The ones you want to work with are very busy, so it's very important that you focus on that. Next slide. By way of background, the National Convergence Technology Center was built on a regional center that actually was originally established in 2004. Interestingly enough, I was hired by Collin County Community College in 2001. I don't know, just right before the dot-com bust, but actually I interviewed 2 days after 9/11, and what they wanted me to do was grow IT enrollments at that time. Anyone that knows anything about IT and what happened in the dot-com bust knows that that was a futile effort because, in fact, the demand for IT workers went down, and in the North Texas region alone, there were 70,000 to 100,000 IT-related workers that were laid off. Well, we actually formed our original grant, our original regional grant, for the purpose of figuring out what the next new thing would be in IT, because I really didn't believe, having been in IT for a number of years, I did not believe that IT jobs could be totally going away within the United States. I've seen the industry go down and I've seen it come back up, but when it comes back up a little differently. So we formed a consortium. We sought National Science Foundation money and got it, first regionally, now nationally, and we work with 57, I say plus because we have people in the pipeline right now wanting to join us, 57 college and university partners. And again, we primarily focus on network infrastructure. Some people call that networking. Some people also include it as mobility and data communications. It has to have some amount of cybersecurity in it as well, and we do. And also it's beginning to have more and more real programming. We designed everything we've done for the original regional and also for the national in lockstep, and I mean lockstep with the businesses, to ensure that the students that finish our programs are very well prepared to be hired. You can see some, next slide. You can see some of our partners on the next slide. There are 8 partners, and then again we have 57 other colleges and universities we work with. Next slide. I will say that this business and industry leadership team approach, notice it's not advisory. The process was developed under the National Science Foundation grant, but it's already been spread several places. I just finished a year ago a round 1 DOL consortium, a $20 million consortium that was 7 colleges in 6 states, and we used the built process there for designing all our curriculum and getting it approved in line with the DOL requirements. We've also worked with several other colleges and programs. The Shine Center out in Washington, we worked with them and they adapted a version of our approach. The North Arkansas Community College IT program has done the same. And there even is a sailing program in California, a program that actually prepares the people that staff the very large yacht that are on the West Coast. That sailing program curriculum was designed using this same approach. And then, of course, we have Mary Winchester from McHenry Community College, who's going to talk to you about how they adapted the program, as will Julie Siak from the Maricopa District. Next slide. Here's the typical advisory council. Usually 1 or 2 times a year are required, and sometimes that's the only time those business reps are on your campus. Well, I will offer that's probably not very tight engagement. If they're only on your campus once or twice a year, they're not really invested in your program too terribly much. Also, too, the people that you may have in your membership may have a very mixed level of knowledge. They may be technical frontline people, or they could be someone who was involved in the industry maybe even several years ago. I will also say that I have sometimes found that the list of people that are on the advisory council sometimes include people that have moved away, or even in one case it was someone who was deceased. That's not very involved either. And if the group advises on the program or just reviews what is happening, I would allege that that is not as tight of an engagement situation as you might prefer. Plus, in our area, I'm in the DFW Metroplex, there are actually 11 separate named colleges, as well as our huge college district that serves 54,000 students. We have, I think, 4 campuses. Anyway, a lot of different programs exist in our region. Well, a given individual who is very influential probably cannot participate in that many different advisory councils. So when we started our original regional grant, we had the people come together from all those colleges and benefit from the wisdom of the business people. Next slide. The typical business advisory council may be a rubber stamp group. It may produce a graduate that is not readily employable. That's not so good, and I will say that some of the funding agencies for our grants believe that business advisory councils are rubber stamp groups. So if yours isn't, and on the next proposal that you write, you need to make sure that you are clear that though it is named advisory, your group really takes the information that they tell you and takes it to heart. And the attendees that are on the council may or may not be the right level. I will say that sometimes if you have a preponderance of HR people only on the business team, it's not very, very strong, especially not strong in terms of looking at future requirements for the industry. Because typically the HR people get the requirements for hiring from the actual line managers that are going to do the hiring. So it's important to have some of those people on your group as well. And then the businesses might not be truly engaged because they don't feel like their input is particularly being used. Next slide. All right, again, the approach works for any technical program. I also even used it for a technical writing program, which even though it has the word technical, it's really an English program. It worked as well. And it's very important to make sure that the people that are in a build know that they are co-leading your work. I do have to say that we used to say that we had the business and industry leadership team leading our work, but I got into a bit of a jam because they said, why can't you have a 90-hour associate's degree? They wanted a whole lot more information to be covered for the graduate, and there really wasn't any way to do that, at least not within the public community colleges across the nation. Again, a regional council is a very good idea, and ours is both national and local because, in fact, our businesses in the DFW area, many of them are national, but they have hiring needs in the DFW area as well. We also meet regularly, quarterly, not 1 or 2 times a year. And we'll talk about that in a bit of detail here as we go along. The right people need to be on the council. You can have high-level technical executives, and that's very good to have. But it's important that even if you have somebody who's a vice president or a director, that they have stayed technical as opposed to just being a program manager as they have gone up the line in their increasing responsibility. First line managers and technicians, of course, are very important because they tell you what is needed in the job. And then HR representatives are very good to have on the team as long as they're not the sole representative for a given company. Next slide. Again, more than an advisory council. I know that I'm saying this over and over again, but it's very important. It is a leadership team. This group here on the right, that's Glenn Wintrick from Dell. He was in the Chief Innovation Office for Dell up until the end of July this year. He's been on our team now since 2004. Actually, he was on it slightly before then because he helped us with the proposal that was awarded in 2004. On the left is Matt Glover. He's the Chief Technology Officer for a company called LaBelle. He is our current chair for our build, and he's been on the build about 6 years at this point. You have to know that they're getting something out of this or they would not be continuing to be there this long. I have to tell you that for both of these individuals, I can ask them what they're doing on a particular date in the future, just make up a date, and they'll first check their schedule, and then they'll say, okay, I'm free, where are we going, what are the top 3 things we're going to accomplish. They will go to conferences with us, they will present to students, they will do just about anything I ask because they co-own the program. Next slide. Now, how do you get these people? Well, I would have a draft letter and a script that I would use. I'd figure out who do I want to know from, who do I want to hear from. I would address those people, and for each targeted business, I would decide on a minimum and optional set of expectations. I would suggest that the minimum expectation is that they participate once a year with you in the curriculum alignment process. And then the optional expectations could be anything from speaking to classes, to presenting at conferences, to mentoring students, mentoring faculty, all sorts of things like that. I would draft a written letter or a script that I would use on the telephone. Do not expect to send email in a blast to a lot of folks and have all of them just be clamoring to join your business team. That doesn't work. This is a very high-touch situation. I have been successful when I when I printed a letter and actually put it in an envelope with a stamp on it. I've been very successful with that. I've also been successful phoning and talking to the person that I might want to get. Now, what happens if you don't know who you want to talk with within a business? Well, I start at the highest level officer's office for the company in the region, and if that's not the right place, they'll tell you who is the right person to talk to put them on your team. Next slide. So be specific about what you want from the businesses. I certainly, on the first recruitment call, would not say, well, I want you to sponsor scholarships or I want you to give us equipment. I would talk more about we want to be of service to you because we do, and we want to make sure that our program produces graduates that are going to be readily employable. Share your passion. Share your vision. I don't know very many people that are in education who are not extremely passionate about what they're doing. Share it. Emphasize the win-win for the business person. You get what you want to make sure the program aligns properly, and then hopefully you can figure out what's in it for them, what do they want out of it, and emphasize that you don't really want it to be a one-way street. Also, too, what happens if you talk to the person's assistant? Well, that's really easy. You pitch what you're wanting to that assistant and say, I'm searching for the right person within your company to help us with, whatever you have on your script, and you ask who would that person be within your company. And once you get a name, and I've never had a problem with that assistant giving me a name, once you have a name, go ahead and call that person and say, so-and-so in whoever's office it was, referred you to that person, and then talk with them. Next slide. Okay, how do we handle these 4 meetings every year? Well, initially they were all face-to-face. I do have to tell you that. However, the people that you really want are going to be the people that are super, super busy. So what we do now is we have one face-to-face meeting annually. And even that face-to-face meeting, this last time, we had half of our members online using WebEx and dialing in. And we had half of our members actually in the room, and it actually worked okay, but it was a synchronous meeting where they could discuss each of the knowledge areas and they could prioritize them together. It is a modified DACM or a job skills analysis process that identifies the knowledge, skills, and abilities that are needed from the graduates. This is truly a 4 to 6 hour process because you start with a pro forma list of KSAs, and then the business people get to prioritize each one of them together, and they need to discuss them. Because, in fact, sorry, there's someone at my door. I happen to be at a hotel. Bottom line of it is that you need time for them to discuss. That's a very, very important part of the process. Also, faculty need to determine how to address those KSAs through the curriculum by cross-referencing them to existing courses after the business people have had their discussion and made their prioritization. Once the faculty member have decided on the cross-referencing, what are you covering now, what needs to be covered later, then the groundwork has been laid to develop new modules or courses to fill the gaps. Next slide. The other 3 meetings annually are virtual. They're through WebEx for us, could be GoToMeeting, whatever, could be Zoom. The part that's very important in these meetings is identifying the trends to get ahead of curricular changes that might be necessary. Very, very important to get those trends out front because we are not very fast at addressing changes that the business people want. We also want an informal forecast of future employee needs. If they say, well, this is the kind of person I want to hire, but I'm only going to hire 1 every 3 years of these kinds of people, we need to know that too. And also, if you're doing a grant or if you're needing to have someone weigh in on your entire program, how your certificates and degrees are set up, you can actually use that meeting to talk about that. And you can talk about your major grant activities and opportunities for them to help you at any of these virtual meetings that occur. Next slide. Okay, this comes from Matt Glover, our BILT chairman. There's quite a bit of differentiation between an advisory role for the businesses and a business-led situation where they're actually in a leadership role. If they are suggesting KSAs and you don't have to do anything with them, and if in fact you don't do anything with them, maybe they come back next year and find out that they spent a lot of time trying to help you align your program and you didn't do it, that erodes their confidence in your program and it erodes their engagement overall. The business is not going to be heavily invested if they're ignored, and if they're ignored long enough, they won't even keep coming back. If they're in a leadership role, it has worked beautifully for the businesses to stay engaged. They feel like they have skin in the game. They feel very much a sense of ownership of the program. It's a way for them to reduce on-the-job training time, which is expense, and it gives them an opportunity to give back. But I would say do not emphasize just them having a philanthropic interest. Because what happens is if it's a philanthropic interest only, they're not likely to be with you on an ongoing basis. However, if they have some other interest specifically in your program, they will be with you for years. I've even had people, well, we've had several people change companies, and they notify us they're changing companies, so we need to change their email address. And at that point, they just continue on, and we don't particularly know that they've ever changed companies. They keep working with it. Next slide. So what's in it for the professors? What's in it for the business leader? What's in it for the student? What's in it for the employee? Well, students, we want to make students into strong employees and give them a start on a real career. I don't know any of the professors in our programs who don't want to do the absolute best job they can with the students so that they are really prepared for the workforce. And I would say that early business engagement really helps. Consistent engagement with businesses really helps. They will do all sorts of things for you. Mentoring students, mentoring faculty, internships, externships. They will grade capstone courses. They will do all of that. The business leader loves to get employees that are ready to go, that they can actually get productivity from right away, that they don't have to spend hours and hours training them. They also are very anxious to check out the talent that is coming through our doors so that they can influence that talent and make them stronger potential employees. Next slide. So what are the results of active business engagement? Well, curriculum alignment so that, and you can look at the last item on this sheet, so that students get jobs. That is a very, very, very important of having businesses involved. And then the other things that businesses can do is help you with recruitment events because they're much more credible in talking to your potential students or your current students about what the opportunities are. They're much more credible than you are. Then the professional development for faculty. We have every year held what we call our Working Connections event. And this Working Connections event is a week-long deep dive training session for 100 to 120 faculty from across the U.S. And within the last 3 or 4 years, we've always had 1 or 2 tracks that are totally 100% sponsored and paid for by some of our business teams, and that works out well for everybody. Also, internships and externships, both actual physical internships and actual virtual internships, because virtual internships are a whole nother topic, but that's a way for students who don't have time for internships to get some of the benefits of an internship. And it's very important to have the businesses in contact with the students so that the students have someone to talk to your classes, help author white papers, and participate in panels. The students ultimately, though, are the beneficiaries of all this work, and they get jobs. Okay, next slide. At this point, I would like to introduce Mary Winchester. I had the privilege of helping their group draft their very first proposal for a National Science Foundation grant, and they have adapted the built model to their own needs, and they have learned some things along the way. So Mary, take it away. Appreciate your help.
Hi, everybody. Hi, everyone. My name is Mary Winchester, and I'm talking about the first year of adapting to the built model. We've had a lot of success. We've had some things that we're going to need to change. And before we even began working with the built model, we had to change the mindset at our school because, as I had said, we were largely doing advisory committees just because we had to for Perkins money. So getting buy-in from the school wasn't too hard, but we needed to get individual instructors to buy in and help us recruit for this. And that was how we got started. Next slide, please. So the big challenge is recruiting people for the built team. We wanted to get, and as Ann said, busy, successful industry professionals are the ones that you want, and they're often hard to get scheduled. And so we had to talk to them, we had to connect with them, sell them on how this will help their company in the long run, and a lot of them did join to help us build a better degree. Now we're doing this, we started with this because we received a National Science Foundation grant that we're in our second year on to create a mobile design and development degree, and a lot of our industry partners came in specifically to help us create that degree. Next. Our first meeting was our longest meeting. We wanted to go through the knowledge, skills, and abilities. We had scheduled it to go through lunchtime, and unfortunately, We ran out of time. Even the time we scheduled was not enough to go through all the knowledge, skills, and abilities we wanted to. And in addition to that, many people only stayed for 2.5 hours and then had to leave. Next. So that first meeting, we did a good job recruiting a cross-section of people. We had programmers and developers, we had HR people, we had placement firms, we had presidents. We fed them, we gave them caffeine because business people run on caffeine, and we tried to keep things moving along. We had a really good discussion over several areas, and a lot of areas we just came to agreement very quickly on. What went wrong? We tried to use a phone-in and a online conferencing. We should have just used a phone-in number. People were leaving before the meeting was over, and we only got about through half of our KSA. Next. So what we learned is to narrow our focus. We should not have tried to cover everything that we did in that meeting, and future meetings we scheduled for no more than 2 hours. Even live meetings we were keeping it 2 hours or less. Generally our target for our online meetings was to have a meeting scheduled for an hour and a half, and we tried to have it over in an hour to an hour and 15 minutes because sometimes there were off-topic discussions afterwards, but we wanted to be respectful of our participants' time so they'll come back. So the challenge for online, it was hard to get people to attend, and sometimes it's harder to facilitate discussion and communication online. That got better with each meeting. We all got better at doing it. And we have to be aware of outside issues. The first time we tried to do an online conference, we did it around December 12th, and we discovered that December is a bad month for businesses, so we've sort of shifted all of our schedules over a month, so our winter meeting will be in January this year, and we anticipate that that will go a lot better. Next. The big thing is to keep in touch between the different meetings. And also you're going to have to replace new people for those who don't show up, because some people say that they're going to do it and they sound really committed and they never show up and they quit answering your emails. So even though we had a lot of people who were interested in helping us, we didn't have a lot of people stick through the whole process. We did find that to remind them of the meetings using the calendar function in Outlook was nice because they could accept or decline and it would put it right into their calendars. And the most important thing is when you do have their time, respect it and make meaningful use of it. Next. And then it's a continuous outreach. We want to call and keep in touch with people between meetings. With several of our programmers, I was chatting online and Facebook because when I was developing courses, a lot of people, who, even ones who didn't come to the meeting, if I had a question about how something was done in business, I could start a chat group in Facebook with several different people, usually with the programmers, and say, hey, how are you doing this? What programs are you using? And a lot of people were talking to me between the meetings and helping me and proofreading and checking what we were doing and making sure that we were getting things right. It's important to continue to work with them and to stay on top of how things are done in industry, and then after they tell you and you put it into your program, sending back the documents and saying, hey, did I get it right? Is this what you meant? Next. So where are we now? Well, I wrote this slide on Monday. We had our second live meeting on Wednesday, and it was very disappointing. We did do, our major success is that we did get our degree, 3 certificates, and 12 new classes written in the first year, including one of the things that came up from our group is that they are hiring a lot of independent contractors instead of regular employees, and both our build team and our prior students were telling us that we weren't preparing them to be contractors, so we brought in an additional class on digital freelancing due to that. This week didn't go so well. We had one person show up live for our live meeting who was not an employee of the school, and we had several people online, but the live component, because we are in the far suburbs of Chicago, most of our businesses are downtown Chicago. It didn't go so well. Next year, our live meeting, we're going to try coming to the businesses and going to downtown Chicago. I'm turning the leadership of the meeting over to our department chair, Bill, and we're going to try to do an after evening meetup in Chicago where we're actually coming to them to see if it works better. So that's where we're at the end of the year. We accomplished a lot. Our online meetings are getting better. Our second live meeting did not go nearly as well as we had hoped. Next.
I'll take over here and introduce Julie Siak from Maricopa Community College District. And Julie, take it away.
Good afternoon. So honored to be with you this afternoon and talk about the builds at the Maricopa Community Colleges. We implemented the model because we had two primary drivers. We recognized that we were not top of mind for our workforce providers. And we also heard feedback that Anne had alluded to, that multiple advisory committee problem. We had senior leaders contacting our chancellor for our entire multi-college district saying, you're asking us to serve on too many committees. Get your acts together. And so we thought the built model would be ideal. We developed 4 builds, and the motivation for the builds were basically looking at our economic development and workforce development industry partners. And so the built areas were identified based on what a lot of the economic development activities in our region were. Advanced manufacturing was the first to launch. In the region, advanced manufacturing has a very active group of employers, and so it made sense for us to start with advanced manufacturing. We then launched healthcare second. You'll probably hear lots more about sector strategies, and there was a very active healthcare sector strategy through our Greater Phoenix Economic Council. We also launched business services. We were fortunate that we have some very large national companies. You probably know State Farm recently relocated to the Tempe area. And then information technologies. As Anne has alluded, IT is continuing to just burgeon in our region as well. This was a picture of our first built meeting. Just joking, but it really was that well attended. How we charter our builds, and we've all agreed that across all 4 builds that we have a similar charter. And we ask our built members to affirm their commitment. They understand the purpose of the build and their responsibilities. They're much more motivated to participate and sustain that momentum for the build. It's really an engaging and empowering ability to share this charter with the group and know that across all 4 industry sectors, not one industry partner had any significant changes to the built charter. They could identify and say that that will keep them engaged in the build. The membership and structure. Anne identified some really key important aspects to membership. We have added a 2-year term. One reason we thought a 2-year term was realistic was then the business and industry partners knew that there was a defined time limit. If they want to continue on beyond 2 years, they're more than welcome. This also gave us that opportunity that Mary talked about. If you have somebody that doesn't show up, then you can go ahead and substitute. This was a significant change for our faculty to know that when they participated in the respective build, that they are a non-voting member. I don't know about faculty at your locations, but that is definitely a change, that they come to a meeting and they really have no vote. They're there to really listen and be engaged with what the business industry leadership team members are suggesting. They can provide some great input about their programs, but when it comes to deciding on what the action steps are at each of the quarterly built meetings, the faculty are not really there to vote. We found it really helpful for our business and industry leaders to say, we're going to take 90 minutes of your time. We found that our participation skyrocketed when we set that the meeting was less than 2 hours. We also talked about how important it was for them to be there, and that if they weren't able to participate, send a substitute that had an equal level of experience that you have. For our builds, we identify 2 business and industry co-chairs, and the meetings are led by these 2 leaders. For example, Mike Lasecki is the facilitator for the advanced manufacturing built, and he's at the table facilitating, but it's those 2 chairs that really lead the group. The benefits for BILT members. Already we are seeing those benefits. They understand now the graduates of our programs, the types of programs, so they're seeing that talent management pipeline in action. And it really engage those business and industry members because they have those connections. They know who they can contact amongst their peer business cohorts, as well as within the educational setting. We are getting much better alignment of our educational programs with the current technology and industry needs. We also have established websites. So if you went to this website for the Business and Industry Leadership Team for Advanced Manufacturing, you will see pictures of all of the members. You can see the meeting notes, and it's really helping build those connections in real time. We talked about the responsibilities on the education side, and we kind of joke that if you create a mnemonic that the education side, we have to learn to laugh, listen, act, and follow through. That 3rd bullet point, follow through, is key. And reference that the business leaders expect you to act and follow through. And that's really, I think, building a whole different culture amongst our faculty when they see that business is working at that speed of business and not the speed of academia. Some of the results, I'll speak first from the advanced manufacturing built. The business and industry leaders quickly identified that there is much needed employment as well as educational needs for automation and robotics, for additive manufacturing, and industrial maintenance. And it was really great to see that synergy amongst all the business and industry partners coalesce around these 3 priorities. So then the subcommittees then take those action steps for these identified areas of priority. And then it's the subcommittees that are working between each meeting and then providing follow-through and reporting so the whole build can then see that there's action going on in between the quarterly meetings. We pose some critical questions to our builds to try to engage that conversation, and it was so enlightening. For many of our builds, we only got through the very first critical question because all the business and industry partners just kept dialoguing with each other, and it was really wonderful. I want you to look at critical question number 4. Our governing board has charged us with providing proof to our governing board that the workforce development groups throughout all 10 colleges are truly responsive to industry. So what we created was a 1-question survey. So each of the built leads are sending out a 1-question survey to all of the built members, asking, do you feel the Maricopa Community Colleges are responsive to the needs in your industry? And then we just give them an opportunity to also give us feedback. And we are going to be reporting these data to our governing board as documented proof that our builds are being responsive, or what are the areas that we need to improve. And you can guess what was the number one item that came up, and it was our curriculum process is not timely enough. What we also do at our BILT meetings, and Anne alluded to this and the importance of BILTs, is you've got to be ahead of the trends. And so at our quarterly BILT meetings, we bring in industry presentations, and it is so dynamic and wonderful to have these business and industry leads share with their peers what are the emerging trends. Our most recent BILT meeting, we talked about the additive manufacturing trends, and it was fascinating, and even brought in additive manufacturing in healthcare. Yes, we are getting to those additive manufacturing principles across all BILTs. What are some of the challenges of the BILT? Well, I will tell you, it's really on the education side. We are slow to respond with our curriculum. We also know that sometimes that participation, as Mary found out, you don't expect that you're going to have 15% not participate. And then that follow through. We've got to make sure that we are showing that commitment to follow through. And I will turn it back over to Anne as the moderator.
Thank you, Julie. I do have a few questions. One is about availability of our presentation and the recordings, and that will come to you via an email for all registrants for this webinar. I would also refer you to the site for the CCTA, which is going to be on an ending slide here. We actually had a situation where we have already recorded about 20 webinars, and those recordings and the slides for those are available. Another question, though, how do you decide when a subcommittee is needed, Julie?
Thank you for that question. When the BILT identifies that there is an area of need, and I will speak from a healthcare perspective. At the healthcare BILT meeting, many of the members said, what are the community colleges doing to address that healthcare is now being delivered more in that community setting? Excuse me, how do we do better care coordination? So as a group, the BILT members identified that we need to have a subcommittee for care coordination. So it really is what is the will of the BILT members, and it was very thrilling for us to see that there's a whole different paradigm that we have to shift to for our curriculum to really embed that kind of integrated professional education model across care coordination.
Thank you. This is our subcommittees, they like to call them tiger teams, and they determine, and actually the same thing happens for us. The business lead, we have one chair. The business lead determines when there needs to be a subcommittee based on whether or not the discussion needs to be detailed enough that it's really not going to fit adequately within our hour-and-a-half meeting or even in our 4 to 6 hour meeting. And I have to say that over time, and again, we've been doing this for 12 years, but over time, sometimes our businesses, our meeting will be over in 6 hours, but they'll still be there 2 hours later because they are so engaged and so excited about what they're doing. One of the things I would say that you were talking about is you have to provide feedback on what you've done, and Mary, you've done that too, in terms of providing feedback on what you've done with the recommendations that they've already provided you. Also, how both of you have talked about respecting their time. We're probably still going to stick with our 4 to 6 hours once a year, and then an hour and a half the other 3 times. But I think you've got to do whatever you've got to do with your group to keep them coming and keep them engaged. So I think it's, adapt these ideas. These are not things that you need to replicate. The belt model is the key is to have the businesses be in charge of telling you what you need to teach, and the educators need to listen to them and try as best as possible to implement what's requested. And if you can't implement something that they've requested, at least report back and tell them we can't implement it and give a reason. That's pretty important. Also, what do you think about adding new people? Either of you can answer that. Julie or Mary, what do you think about adding new people to the group?
I think that because people are going to be leaving and changing jobs, it's essential to keep new people coming in.
I agree. I think it's essential to have new people coming in just because the group gets kind of stale if you don't have new people coming in as well. And don't quote me on that because I value all of my business people, but I think they sometimes get a bit comfortable. Also, too, sometimes there's a new technology that needs to be considered. In IT, there are lots of new technologies coming down the pike, and it's important to have people on your team that know about the new things. So, any more questions at this point for the good of the group? I think that's what I have seen so far on questions. Hold on, I have another. Should there be a different built for curriculum development versus strategic decision making normally found at the business executive level? Well, that actually depends. I'm going to take that one on because it's coming from a group that I'm about to work with. If the business executive is still technical, they will enjoy being involved actually at the KSA level and at the trend level. If they are not technical, then it might be appropriate to have a different kind of a meeting for them. However, it's enough to get them to come to one set of meetings as opposed to trying to get 2 sets. And I think it's a lot to handle to have a separate built for the executives. Any other questions? Anything else you would like to add, Mary, or you, Julie? Okay, with that, let's go to the next slide. We have the next webinar on November 17th about effective strategies for job placement. Susie Davison, who worked with me on our our DOL consortium grant, is a job developer and career coach. She is awesome. This lady cold called on 250 different businesses and helped us form the appropriate built teams. She's going to cover some techniques that she used for building the relationship, for getting them to talk to her, and I'm just kind of there for facilitation for that one. So that's going to be a really interesting webinar, I do believe. Next slide. As you exit this webinar, there will be a survey. We really want you to fill out that survey and tell us what we can do better. Tell us what else you'd like to know. And we are trying to be of service to everyone who's needing help in workforce programs across the nation. So please do take a moment. And I'd like to thank Julie from Maricopa and Mary from McHenry Community College in Illinois for joining us today to talk about the adaptations that they've made so far. And I appreciate all of you attending today to hear what we have to say. Hopefully it's been beneficial to you. Thank you very much and have a pleasant afternoon.